Yeah.
Okay, it's 9 o'clock. Let's start our meeting with a moment of silence, please. Thank you. First thing we need is a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda. Support.
Any corrections, deletions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Does anybody from the public like to speak before we get into our agenda? Seeing none, we need a motion to approve the minutes of May 20 and May 30.
I move we approve the minutes of May 20th and May 30th. I second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Need a motion to approve the May bills.
I make a motion we approve the May bills. Support.
All those in favor of paying the bills, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We have a payroll change. Russ, would you like to add anything about Gabrielle?
No, other than she's been on with us 5-6 months as a part-timer, doing an excellent job. You may have seen her, we had a major trial here a month or so ago, and she was in the courthouse for a week straight there with Kevin Jurian. She does a good job. She's born and raised in the Rose Hill area, and working out real good. So this would be to fill the full-time female position at Carmen Lewis. That was only a couple weeks ago. She's quit and moved to New York. So.
You'd like to have her start June 1st, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I move we approve the payroll change of hiring Gabrielle Selson as of June 1st for $30,000. I second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Judy, want to talk about the Heartland Risk Pool renewal review? Contract for another year. Thanks for coming, Judy.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
You've probably never met a couple of these members of our board, have you?
No, I haven't.
This is, I'll let you introduce yourself. Just.
I'm Judy Funk, and I work with Heartland Insurance Risk Pool. If you're familiar with Heartland, they're an insuring organization we've been with since 1987. So you and 9 other counties own Heartland, and then Heartland pays me to administer it, keep an eye on it, just do whatever I can to make life go smoother for everybody. So what I'm doing here today is going through your renewal that we're preparing for the 1920 year. And I'll try to make it quick and painless for you. What I'm giving you today is copies of what I'm giving Sue as the trustee that sits on the board. So we'll go through the numbers with you and try to put it in a format so it's easy to understand and easy to follow. So there's a cover letter there that just kind of walks you through how we do the renewal. We cut off all changes as of May 31st, and then I'll be preparing the invoices the week of June 17th. So that means if you added a car June 2nd, we'll add it to your schedule, but you wouldn't be billed for it. So whatever your exposures were on May 31st, that's where we are for the year. So your invoice may change a little bit depending upon if you added any cars from April to like the end of May or any property. And then just want to call your attention for the last, I think it's 10 to 12 years, Heartland has been doing premium credits. Your share of that premium credit, as you can see there in the letter, is $40,887. So that comes right off the bottom line of what your invoice would be for the year. That's based upon your experience from 1987 on. So any of the premiums you paid for self-insured coverages, netting out the claims that have been paid on your behalf, then that is how your part of the premium credit is calculated. And then there's also premium credits for the county-related entities. The landfill is one of those entities, as well as the animal shelter. And we put their credits together. That's right at $3,600. So that comes right off the bottom line of their premium. And then you're also involved with Central Iowa Juvenile Detention Center. Their premium credit was $12,468. Any questions about the premium credits and how that works?
Does each county get the same amount, or is it
No.
per county, by their record?
Yeah, it just totally depends on your experience and what you've paid in for your premiums. So I would say you're one of the larger counties, you've had excellent experience, you're probably up close to the top line for what your premium credit is. And then we've got some smaller counties that haven't maybe had as good claims experience, so they're not going to be close to that. But it is based upon what you've paid in and your experience since 1987.
Is it pretty much the same as last year, or
It's pretty close.
is it?
It's really pretty close, it's probably within about $1,500. Any questions about that?
Just kind of like an umbrella too then?
We'll go through your coverages with
Okay.
you, because this is going to be all your property, your liability, your auto, your public officials. So we'll take that, if you look at the next page there, we're going to take that line by line, and I promise I'll make this as painless as possible, so that I don't bore you with insurance speak. But what we do here is show you where you were in 2018-19 and compare it to 19-20, so you get a feel for what the changes are. Heartland hasn't changed rates for probably about 15 years. The exposures have changed, meaning if you have more property, if you have more autos. The only thing where the rates change are workers' compensation, and that's because Heartland uses the rates that are promulgated by the state of Iowa. So there you'll see the changes. Now, first off the bat, there's your property coverage, and you can see you're almost up, almost 20%. Again, no rate change there, but you had the Conservation Educational Center, is that what you call it? So that was a pretty big bump for you.
So question, does that come out of their budget or does that come out of our budget?
Their department, their departmental.
Okay.
So, and then that was added January, February, so that was just prorated. So what you paid for, this shows what you paid in premiums as of July 1st last year. So really the change isn't as much because you would have paid a few $1,000s there for the prorated premium. You're in the marine, that's your equipment, that's primarily secondary roads, but there's some equipment from some other departments. And as we go through this, you'll see you've got schedules attached. Sue's office is really good, Jody works on it too, about sending those schedules out to the affected department heads so they can look to make sure, yes, we still have that equipment, no, we don't, yes, we have those cars. So they review that a few times a year. Your equipment breakdown coverage, that came down just a little bit, or I mean, it went up a little bit, but it's down from where we originally had expected it to be. It's at $29.53, and that's because the Heartland Board decided to change carriers on that. And that equipment breakdown coverage is what we used to call boiler and machinery. So it would be coverage that if there was an equipment breakdown or failure with a boiler, covered hot water heater. We've also seen it on phone systems. So when there's electric strike, that's going to be covered by Heartland. If there's some other kind of issue, then what we do, if it's not covered by Heartland, we send it over to the equipment breakdown coverage. And then errors and omissions, that's the next coverage there. That's primarily your employment practices coverage. Also, if you had any kind of open meetings or open records issue, that would be addressed under this coverage. And you can see that's down just a little bit. That's based on your number of employees. And we see that go up and down when Sue's office is putting that together. They'll pull a payroll out from probably February or March. And sometimes you might have a couple of extra people or a couple less people. So that's how that fluctuates just a little bit. It doesn't include any of your summer help or your temporary help. This would be your regular employees. Township coverage, that's the liability coverage for your township clerks and your township trustees. There isn't property coverage there, but this would address if there was something where someone got hurt in the township cemetery. This is strictly liability coverage, not property coverage. Law enforcement's pretty close. Last year you had 31 officers. This year you have 31 and a half. And you might look at that and say, how do we get a half or how do we get a quarter? So your full-time employees or your dogs are considered as one officer. Part-time employees, if they work more than 30 hours a month, we consider them as a half a person. If your part-time or reserve employees work less than 30 hours a month, then they're considered a quarter of a person. So when we work on the renewal in March, the sheriff's office gives those numbers to the auditor's office and then they pass those along. Public officials and bond and crime, that's written separately through Gallagher, so we don't bill for that. Your general liability, that is the liability coverage that covers you for roads, slip and fall in the courthouse possibly. That's based upon your expenditures. Last year we went to a little bit of a change because we want to see that premium stay pretty static. We take the last 6 years of your net expenditures. We throw out the high, we throw out the low, and average those 4 years. And so that's what keeps that premium budgetable and a little bit more straight line there. So you can see it's down just a little bit. Auto liability and physical damage, again, that's on your auto fleet. The auto liability is up just a little bit. It looks like we have a couple more cars this time of year than we did last year. And again, we see a lot of activity at the end of June with law enforcement cars. That won't change your invoice. You'll see that change next year. Your crime coverage, that again is not your employee fidelity or your employee crime. That would be crime from the outside. If someone had a petty cash account in one of your departments and then someone from the outside stole that petty cash account, that's the coverage that we would go to there. Then your next coverage there, workers' compensation, you can see that's up almost 6%. What we're going to do is walk through what we call the modification factor on the workers' compensation so you can understand that, because that's purely based on your experience. So that's up just a little bit. Your payrolls are up about $400,000. So that contributed to your workers' compensation going up, but we're going to take that apart here in a few minutes. And then premium for additional limits, several years ago, you increased your limits by $2 million, and so the carrier bills separately for those, so that's why we see that a change there. Special vehicle equipment, that's a coverage that we added several years ago. That covers all the equipment in the sheriff's cars, the computers, printers, all that technology that changes all the time. If the car would be wrecked or would be vandalized, all that computer equipment inside would be covered at replacement cost rather than actual cash value. And so we added that coverage a few years ago. I think it's been 3 or 4 years ago we paid on, there was a cell phone that was pretty expensive because it had some special things on it, and one of the deputies drove over it. And so we broadened that coverage so we could cover the cell phone under that. And then cyber liability, that's the coverage that was added in 2013. Again, that's your cyber liability, so that affects your computers. That Heartland pays for half of the premium on that. Then the other half is allocated amongst the counties. Half of it is an equal share. The other half is based upon how many employees you have. So it's a little bit different for each county depending how small or large they are. So when all is said and done, you're up just around 6%. And the biggest contributors to those are the property, which is your conservation center, and then your workers' compensation, with your payroll being up and your modifier going up a little bit. And then if you should decide, right now you're at $7 million on your limits. There on the bottom, you can see if you wanted to add to that, increase your limits at all. Then if you went to $8 million, you can see it will be another $27.50 in premium, and then there's a premium for $9 to $10 million. Sometimes boards ask me where should we be, and that's your decision, not my decision. You're kind of right in the middle of the pack. We've got some that have lower limits than you, we have some that have higher limits than you. So you're probably kind of average as the counties choose their limits. Then the next page there is just the allocations for, depending on, every county is different on how they allocate their premium out. So what we do here is just show you with dividing the premium credit up by pro rata basis for each premium. And some counties use that, some don't. But it allows you to see that you're down almost $41,000 because you're premium. Do you have any questions about that? On your property, your deductible is $1,000. On your general liability, there's no deductible. So if there's a slip and fall, there's no deductible. On your public officials, which is like your employment practices, that has a $1,000 deductible. And then your law enforcement liability has a $1,000 deductible. Your auto physical damage, hit a deer, that's $500 deductible. So it just kind of depends which coverage you have. Any other questions on that? So the other handouts that I've given to you are your schedules. And again, the first one is your property schedule. And there's two pieces of that. There's the property schedule that lists all your properties out, gives you your address, shows what the building value is, shows what the contents value is, if there's any property in open. The other thing I attach to that is every other year, Heartland has Gallagher Bassett come in and do an appraisal or an estimate on your properties that are $50,000 and over. So this was something your board looked at last year. I just attached it for your information. So you can see there's a one-page attachment that just shows you where your current values are as compared to the Gallagher Bassett values. And what they use is a replacement cost appraisal. They use software from Marshall Swift. And I'm going to give Sue another copy of the letter, but it kind of explains how they come up with their estimates. And so we just remind people that that's your decision what you want to insure them for, but we want to just suggest you don't get them too far away from the appraisal amount so that we don't have an issue. We had a tornado in one of our counties last year, and their fuel island was taken out by the tornado, and they had it insured for $10,000. It cost them $82,000 to replace it. And we have what we call a margin clause that allows you another 25%. So if you had a $100,000 building and it was completely totaled out and it cost you $150,000 to replace it, well, we can add another $25,000 onto your schedule, which would mean you'd have $125,000 there for that building. So it's a little bit of a sleep insurance. We just want to make sure that we don't get too far away from what those appraised values are. And I'll give
Like a blanket policy there?
excuse me,
Yes, sir.
you know, we would love to have a blanket policy, but our underwriters don't give it to us. That's why they gave us the margin clause. So if you look at this, so you've got $6.5 million on the courthouse. The tornado comes in and just totally totals the building out, and you find out it's going to take you $8 million to replace it. We can add another 25% onto the $6.5. So it's not a true blanket, but it does allow you some extra coverage there. The contents are a part of the margin clause as well. We can't give you any kind of estimate because we don't know what you have for computers and desks and that type of thing. But the margin clause would apply to the contents as well as the money. So this will get updated. We'll get the board approval to work on this at the October meeting. And then by January 1, we'll hope to have this updated, so you'll get that every other year. Then in addition to your property schedule, there's your inland marine schedule, again, what your equipment is, and this is broken down by department. A lot of it is secondary roads, but you've pretty much got almost every department represented there. And again, Sue's department sends this out so that your department heads can review this on a couple times a year basis. You have to look at your contract. What you'd be looking at is who's going to supply the builder's risk coverage. And that would either be by the contractors that are putting the towers up, or Gallagher can place that for you. They place that with a different carrier other than Heartland. So once those get started, we'll just have to look and see what the contracts say to see who's supposed to supply the builder's risk.
You start bringing equipment and stuff, then we should help.
Yeah, that's a separate coverage for builder's risk, and then once it's up, then we want to get them added right away. How soon do you expect to start on those?
I mean, this fall before the construction starts.
Yeah, so as soon as you have contracts ready to go, we should have somebody look at them to see if your contractors are going to supply the builder's risk or if they're expecting you to. then Gallagher can turn those around pretty fast. You also have your auto schedule there, and once that's locked in on May 31st, the schedule will change, your invoicing won't. And what we've run into the past few years is because law enforcement buys and sells so many cars right around the 1st of July, we're having problems with people having to pay for the new ones, but the old ones weren't on the schedule yet. And so this way, we close that out before all that activity starts. If we change the schedule, it's just your invoice doesn't change. So then your next handout there is a one-sheet handout, that's your workers' compensation calculation. And workers' compensation is based upon the classifications for your line of business, which is county government, and then the description of the classifications that each one of your employees are in. And then the auditor's office gives us the estimated payroll. So we take that estimated payroll divided by 100 and then take it times those rates that we get from the state of Iowa, and we come up with that estimated premium. So as you can see there, if you go all the way across, you've got an estimated premium for each classification down the right-hand side, and you come to a total. So you see your total at the bottom is $178,247. Now, because of your workers' compensation experience, your losses have been good, you've got a modification factor of a 0.79. Meaning it's about 21% that comes off of your rate because of your favorable experience.
Does that include that $40,000?
That's totally separate. So this is in that. Now, the modification factor, because we are a pool, we use ModMaster, which is a software program that's designed to mirror the NCCI, which does pretty much all the private sector mod factors. So we'll go through that calculation in a minute. But because, again, of your experience, your mod factor is a 0.79. Lots of people try to say, well, we want to hit 1 because that's average. Well, you are far better than average, far better than that 1. So we get about 20% comes off of your premium. Then we go through the Heartland calculation because you are insured through Heartland. There's another almost 30% that comes off of that. So it started at 178, was modified to 140. We run it through the premium discounts. That's totally separate from your premium credit. Your workers' compensation comes down to less than $99,000 a year. Lots of people out there that would love to have your mod factor. So a lot of commendation to your department heads that have done so well on your workers' compensation experience. Because there's big money savings there for you. So that's how we come up with your premium. Then the next sheet there with the blue box on it shows you how we come up with your modification factor. And again, your workers' compensation is based solely on your experience. So what we do is the calculation takes the last 3 years, does not include the 18-19 year because we're not done with that yet, but it includes 15-16, 16-17, and 18-19. Then we take the audited payrolls by classification. Then we look at your loss data there. You can see on the left-hand side of your payrolls, on the right-hand side of that sheet is your loss data. And then the next page there takes you through the actual calculation. It's an actuarial calculation. I won't bore you with that. It's all built in, so you don't have to worry about somebody making a mistake. It's all built in there for us. But basically, it's a comparison of where an actuary expects you to be based upon your line of business, your payrolls in each classification, and where they expect you to be versus where you actually came up. So we can look at all those numbers all day long and we get kind of cross-eyed because of all those numbers. The best page is the last page, and that's the one that has the charts on it, and that's what's most easy to see what's going on. So if we look at the mod snapshot page, on the left-hand side, the key numbers show your expected losses for your payrolls for those 3 years for a little bit over $240,000. Your actual losses were under $39,000. Again, hats off to your department heads who've been working so hard with their employees to keep these losses low. Gallagher sends out, Chuck's here almost at least 4 times a year to do training. He's the loss control representative for Heartland. So he comes out and does training. Right now he's focusing on the safety manual, so he's working with each of the counties on the safety manual. So if we look at the mod breakdown, which would be the little chart on the right-hand side, and unfortunately it doesn't allow me to modify it for the premium discounts, but your current mod at 0.79, again, your premium would have been $148.15. If you had an average mod, meaning you don't go up, you don't go down, well, that's another $38,000. So that's why that 0.79 is so important. And it's an awesome thing to have. Your minimum mod would be $121,000, again minus the $30,000 or 30% that comes off from Heartland. But you'd always have a mod. Actuarially, you're always going to expect some kind of losses. So what the key number there is looking at your controllable mod. Your controllable mod's about $19,000. And truthfully, then if we take the premium discounts off there, you take 30% off. So your controllable is about $13,000. And then the next picture, which is kind of the most telling of all, is the actual versus expected losses. The goldenrod are what's expected, again, for your classifications in your line of business. The green are your actual losses. So you can see there, with your green being so much smaller than the goldenrod, that's why you're looking at that kind of a mod factor. Now, then I always am looking at the next year. We start our renewal process sometimes as early as October. This year, your 18-19 year, we're looking at losses of a little bit under $60,000. So we're going to lose a year that's probably right around $32,000. That's this year right here. When we do next year's calculation, we'll lose this year, and then we're going to add one. It's about $60,000. So we'll see that 0.79 go up, but knock on wood, to keep everybody safe, everything status quo between now and the first of the year. You'll see some upward movement there, but it won't be a lot. Any questions about mod factors? I find them fascinating. Most people find them boring. And then the last sheet there is something new we're doing this year. It just kind of walks you through really quickly what you're experiencing your claims on. The first page there, and this is 5 years experience, July 1 of 2014 to May 2019. And that's the number of claims on the front there. So you're right in keeping with most people as far as your workers' compensation number of claims being your driver there. Auto claims are 33%. General liability 15%, and then property, everybody's pretty low on that. Again, that goes on your frequency, not your severity. The next sheet there just gives you your claim count by department. LOB means line of business. And you're pretty much in keeping. Some counties are law enforcement, some counties are they're secondary roads. You can see a big driver in law enforcement is your vehicle. And that again is primarily your physical damage. Those deer hits, somebody running into your car, that kind of thing. And again, the purple is your workers' compensation, and the red is your property. Then the next sheet there just gives you your top 10 workers' compensation losses by body part. Your big ones are facial bones and knees. But the red there is the sum of total incurred, so that's the dollar amount paid. The blue is the number of claims. So multiple body parts or systems on hands, frequency-wise, those are the two winners. Severity-wise, it's facial bones and knees. And then the last sheet there just gives you your top 10 workers' compensation losses by cause of loss. A big one for everybody the last few years has been the slippery conditions, ice, snow. So that is your frequency. And then your severity is the purple line there. Your big one there is climbing, walking, running. And another one would be struck by hand injuries, that type of thing. So again, that gives you an idea where your claims are coming from. And then the last two sheets there are just a summary for you for your cyber liability coverage. Lets you know what's covered there. And then your equipment breakdown coverage summary is there as well. It tells you what's covered for those. Any questions? And as you look over this material in the next few days or weeks, if you have questions, just feel free to give me a call or run them through Sue. She knows how to get hold of me and we can get your questions answered for you, because I know that's a lot of information to take in all at one time.
The workers' comp, excuse me, my body parts, this is July 14 to May 19.
Right.
Is this pretty consistent year after year, or is this vary one year to the other? Do you know on these graphs?
You know, I would say the last couple years for everybody, we've just seen so many slip and falls, more than we used to. But we've also had 2 years of really bad ice. But otherwise, it's pretty consistent, age-wise. Your workforce is all, because you're all rural counties, your workforce is all pretty comparative. And so we see a lot of the same kinds of losses. Claims-wise, we work with Creative Risk Solutions. They used to be in West Des Moines, now they're in Rocky. They do a great job. We have a lady named Judy Hammaker who works from her home in Decatur County. So as far as I know, she's just doing a great job, very responsive, very helpful to folks. Dan Field does most of the property liability claims. Again, Chuck Goodman is the loss control representative that comes out and is out here about 4 times a year. We primarily have done annually for years harassment prevention training. This year the board is looking at something different. Rather than having a person come out to each county, we're looking at some different ideas. So in July the board will make some decisions on that. So Heartland wants to be support to you more than just your insurance coverage. We also provide a lot of legal support. That's based upon general legal questions, might have an HR question, or county attorney may have some questions, then they talk to our attorney, Carl Solomons, and he works closely with your department heads and with your county attorney on that. So a lot of different things that Heartland brings to the table, not just your premiums on these things.
Just, because I've been to this meeting with Sue, just to the matter informed, if anything changes in our county, or I've contacted Sue or Judy numerous times just to let her know what's going on with our county, just for liability purposes, in case there's any risk, and they can give us feedback of how to limit some things or stuff to consider.
And just, you're a partner. You and 9 other counties have partnered since 1987. And so our whole goal is service, but also what can we do to help with whatever you've got going on. So it's different than your typical insurance company. Coverage document is written specifically for Heartland. Right, the coverage is as broad as possible. So we're in the habit of looking for coverage, not looking to deny coverage.
Any other questions?
At this time.
So what we need to do is have to have an authorization to bind coverage. You don't have to do that today. If you've got some more questions, we do have to have it signed like July 1 so that we can make sure we get your coverage bound. I'd like to get the certificates out by June 15th so those can get in cars, and your vendors that need to have insurance certificates can get those before July 1.
Next on the agenda is to approve and bind coverage for insurance coverage for fiscal year 1920. Agenda written report, any kind of... Okay. So, if you're gonna do we need a motion to approve and to bind coverage with the Heartland fiscal year 1920.
I make a motion we approve the buying coverage with Heartland for insurance coverage fiscal year 1920.
I second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay. Also, we have approved and authorized signature on Heartland Risk Pool Agreement. This was on our last meeting,
Okay.
and on the front page here, it just talks about starting July 1 of 2020. So we weren't sure if that was a typo or what, so we're going to let you explain what's...
You know, and that's a good question. I've been working with Heartland now for almost 20 years. I wasn't here in 1987, but since I started shortly after. The reason why we do that is, again, we start working on the renewal sometimes in October, just preparing the underwriters for what's going on. And as a partnership with you and the other counties, we need to make sure everybody's on board before we start the renewal process. And so that's why it's historically always been getting it signed the fiscal year before, so that when we start the renewal, we know that everybody's on board and everyone's going to renew. So that's why that's a before. That's
So, we just want to make sure we're not getting ahead of ourselves.
I think
So-
that's an excellent question, and we should have addressed that when we talked to the board in May, so then see what happens.
I'd like to maybe consider approving this risk pool agreement.
I move we approve the agreement with Heartland Risk Pool, authorize the signature.
I second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the Heartland Risk Pool agreement, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's nice to meet you, appreciate your partnership, and
Thanks for all your work too.
that's what I'm here for. Enjoy it, I feel appreciative of all the groups that I work with, so thank you.
Thanks for your
Thank you very
time.
much.
Didn't mean to take so much time.
No, it's all good.
You gotta go through it.
So you both said that to and then we'll go out to animal shelter a little bit and go through their list. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. We have, of course, Resolution 2019. This is a petition to suspend property taxes at 409 South Pearl Street in New Sharon, Iowa. It's based on a recommendation of the Iowa Department of Human Services.
This happens very often.
No, this is my first.
Last one was, I thought, 98 or something, about 20 years ago, according to Connor. It's been a long time. I talked to Andrew about it a little bit, and he pretty much just said it's just, you don't gotta do it. So,
The code.
Code pretty well says you don't have no choice.
Yes. So it's not an abatement, it's a suspension. And so sometime
The taxes will be paid.
the tax will be collected and then that's not how to just suspend it.
The way I understand, there'll be no interest or penalty added on it.
Correct.
Okay.
So with that, we need a resolution to approve, or need a motion to approve resolution
I make a motion we approve resolution 2019-20.
Support?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Resolution passed. Consider proposal from Land Recyclers Incorporated for tower site and environmental services regarding radio communication system towers. This is a proposal from Barry Harrison, the president of LRI. They're proposing to do all the environmental work and soil studies for the structure of the towers. This is one of the proposal. If they accept the proposal, it's in a contract, which will include payment schedule and fees and things like that in more detail.
And I consider, I figure these people have worked with Mr. Freeman before.
Correct.
You know?
Yes,
Yes, if it was in the proposal, it been used before.
yes, Mr. Freeman is recommending this to work with.
That's, I guess, what I was wondering what it is.
They've already done some background work on some of the sites, just to make sure they don't get trouble before they go to talk to the landowners for our own property. So. This system has to be done for it to go to put the spade in the ground to be the foundation for the towers.
Do you want a motion to?
Need a motion to accept the proposal, and they'll send us a contract to accept the modified or just kind of agree on payment schedule and things like that.
Schedule's in there, but
The payment schedule is not in this. They only want 20% down. There's no payment schedule in the proposal.
I thought I read somewhere that's $57,000.
Right, but the schedule when they get paid by what the board they do will come with the contract. The fee, total fee of $57,000 is in this proposal.
Right, okay.
And detail all the studies of what they'll do and site visits to verify it, things like that, is in this proposal. But speaking with Ray and speaking with Barry, I called him. In this proposal, there was no when we're going to pay, pay out according to the work. And so they said, we accept their proposal, $57,000. We're going to work on a contract, and when they do work, we can pay them for that work. I'm going to make a motion to accept the LRI proposal.
Second. Go ahead. Support?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Got an appointment to the Civil Service Commission. Would you like to speak on this at all, Russ?
No, other than after Steve hit me up, I contacted Paul.
Come on, Russ, come on here, please.
I guess I better start this. I mean, Sue said something to me about it, and I talked to Russ about it, and Russ and I kind of, he come back with the name of Paul DeGeese to be appointed to this, and I think Russ is the one that contacted me.
Sue sent me, or got hold of me here like 6 months ago and said that some of the terms were expiring on the county civil service commission, and one of them not even a resident any longer of Mahaska County. Came up with one name, I talked to him, and I found out he's no longer a resident of Mahaska County either. It's a gentleman we're all familiar with. And then Steve hit me up there a couple weeks ago after the meeting, and he mentioned Paul or Jake McGee. And you guys got to make the appointment. I did reach out to Paul a day or two later. He said if you guys are willing to appoint him, he would accept that. He'd be happy to do it for him. So I haven't had a chance to reach out to Jake yet, though. So that's about what I know. I think there was some question as to whether Andrew would have to appoint his representative also. I think you guys appoint two, Andrew appoints one, and I believe one of the gentlemen that sits on there now, his term's not expired yet, so.
Yes, and this, I believe the term is 6 years. We're filling now is a 6-year term, so. And civil service, wrong, it deals with, helps with hiring deputies.
Hiring non-certified people, it gets a little complicated, but they play a very big role in the event I have to discipline a deputy. They play a very large role in that. Discipline has to go through them on, at certain levels, discipline has to go through the Civil Service Commission. And there's a separate one for the county versus the cities. They have their own Civil Service Commissions as well. So, knock on wood, we don't have to use them very often, but it is a pretty important board to have there ready in the event I would need to set it. Certain disciplines, if I discipline a deputy, I have to notify them of the discipline. And that way, if they get an appeal from the employer or from the deputy, they know what's going on ahead of time. So they're not real active, fortunately, but if you need them now, type of thing. So it's good to keep that list updated. And I apologize to you, Sue, for not coming up with the name sooner.
Who's on commission now?
It is, county attorney's representative is Jim Blomgren, so I'm assuming Roseanne or one of the previous county attorneys appointed him. Charlie Van Torn was appointed by a previous board of supervisors, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the third one. Is it Ken something?
And that, yes.
Ken's term is still active. His term's not up. Charlie Van Torn, there again, he's not. He has moved out of the county, and his term's up anyway. And then I don't know if
That's part of the requirement, they have to be a citizen of Mahaska County.
yeah, I believe so, yes.
We point Paul to take Charlie's place.
Yes, because Charlie and Ken were your two representatives, or the board's representatives, and I believe the previous county attorney appointed Jim. So,
All's willing. Got a motion? I'll make a motion to appoint Paul DeGeese as to the Civil Service Commission for a 6-year term.
I second that.
Further discussion? All those in favor of Paul DeGeese for the Civil Service Commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Thank you, Russ. Consider posting for county engineering position. I'll put this on here again, I thought. Just for the public aware about, we had this posted, give or take 3 months ago. We did have one applicant. We called him for an interview, and by the time he came for an interview, the individual had decided with his age and things, he was not interested in moving, and took a part-time or different job in the city he lived in, so he was not interested any longer in the position. So I'd like to post again for a secondary road engineer. Today's June 3. I would not leave it open until June 24. That's 3 weeks. See if anybody else is interested again. So I'm going to make a motion to post for a county engineering position.
Second that.
Further discussion?
Are we going to advertise that this time? Same as last time?
Yeah, we have the ISAC webpage, local paper. ISAC has an engineering, but I don't know if the Iowa DOT has a website for possible.
There should be some new graduates coming out of college up in state of it is not here. They should come for a job, it's fine. If they're any good at all, they can find it. Yeah.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Consider amendment to 2080 agreement for Stephen Memorial Animal Shelter.
I talked to Jason Vanderveer, he's in contact with Mr. Nixon. We're having a meeting Wednesday morning, 7:30. And so I'd like to take a little further. I talked to Andrew Thursday or Friday there about some of the deals. They haven't been following the agreement by having terms and stuff. And some have been on there for years and years, it sounds like. So we're gonna try to get it set up where we know whose year term is, when and where. And if we go to a 6-member board, I'd like to have one appointed each year, so alternate people. Follow me? And so the city would also, so was the society. So this time I'd like to table until, there's no hurry until November 1st to get it done.
That's fine. I just read the one we had before us,
Yes.
and I guess I would just like, I
But,
don't know if I would write it, but I'd like to have one that's all cleaned up, because this one talks about an updated 2080 previous to this, and I'd like to have one, me, I would like to see one that's clean, and rescind that, you know, is the permanent one, and rescinds any previous 2080, that this is the only one moving forward, so there's no confusion of really who's doing what. Because in this document, it talks about a previous 2080,
Yeah.
it talks about an updated 2080, and so,
back in before 94,
yeah.
so working off that. It's Bruce Palmer, most of the people who signed the paper are deceased.
And so I guess I'd like to see a 20D that's, for this date, if you're sends all previous 20Ds, and this is the 20D that's all written down moving forward, so there's no confusion, it's all cleaned up. That'd be my personal preference.
Can we do that, Henry?
Well, Alex, anything is possible. So the current draft I did not make. That was Dave Dixon, the current draft. And speaking with Dave, apparently they've tried to work on revising this 2080 for a number of years, which all the history I'm not familiar with, but this is kind of the latest iteration of a long process, basically. It's my understanding that the 28E has not been rewritten because of some fundamental differences on payment of each entity and that sort of thing. So I think the idea was, right or wrong, they wanted to upset the apple cart as little as possible. I think was the idea in just doing an amendment to this 2080. However, if it's the feeling of the board that you do want a new 2080, basically, that I would assume incorporate the old terms plus the addition of this term. If that's what the board wants, then I can reapproach Dave and see if we can craft something that would just have one master document versus amending it all.
It'd be my preference to have one clean one, but I'm only one of the three here, but I'd like to have one clean one, so if there's every reference back to what each political subdivision responsibilities are, there's no discussion, argument, disagreement between one made in 1990 and one in 2019. It's all one clean, neat, written document. But that's my preference. I think we're operating now is, I'm not sure who all invested money in this building, who the owners really are. I know currently we are paying for, rural people are paying for the services provided to rural townships. And I guess that's our part in this.
It's 30-something thousand, I think, last year.
And so,
This coming year, I guess.
because that's what I'd like to see written is, that's the way we've been operating it, that's the way I'd like to see it written up on my personal side, that's it's clean and neat.
Well, is it the feeling of the board that, on one, do you want to just keep the current language in the old 2080, but add this new language so there's one document that has all the language? Or is it the feeling that besides this proposed amendment, that you want to change additional terms for the original 2080? Like, I'm just trying to get a sense of what direction you're going towards, so that the draft can kind of reflect perhaps your desires.
See, I think in the original 2080, the city of Los Angeles paid for half the cost of building the structure, and the county paid for building half the cost of the structure. So that structure is no longer even usable anymore. We're using it, we're talking about tearing it down. So that part of the 2080 is no longer even valid, in my opinion, because now we have a new structure that was already constructed, and it's my understanding this board didn't have anything to do with that. And so that kind of language in the old 2080 would no longer be valid for what we're operating under today. And so some of that language to me needs to just be removed.
Yeah. Well, perhaps, I mean, if you want to have more substantive changes, talk about like ownership of property and that sort of thing, my suggestion, it's probably better to have some sort of work session. It's very difficult to draft 20E if you don't know what the agreement is, right?
Correct.
So you have to have some agreement in principle about what you want, and then we can go about trying to, put it in writing, basically. But I would say if you want to do more substantive changes, it's probably better to have a work session with all the entities involved. if you're leaning more towards keeping the old language but adding this new into one larger document, obviously that's a lot easier to do. So it really kind of depends what direction you're leaning towards.
I think we need to have a work session to kind of figure out who owns the building, who's going to do what, because the building's already built.
That'd be my preference. You're our member, so I mean,
Yeah. I can approach them Wednesday morning at 7:30 about it, meeting, tell them we want to have a work session, and tell them why, and if they're interested, they'll come, if they're not, go on to something else then.
the members would be this Oskaloosa, City of Oskaloosa, and the Animal Shelter Board.
I think it's society,
Yeah.
There's 3 members, the county, the city, and the society.
Okay.
Right now, they each got 1 representative, but they want to have 2 for each person, to have more bodies to do the work they do with volunteer and stuff. That's our idea. We want that fiscal agent deal, my understanding, that it's declared that the county is a fiscal agent.
Correct.
And that's basically what the amendment's about. But I'm with, I think we should go with the work station, if they get more done that way.
Right.
Or it
As an input.
Yeah, so, need a motion to do that?
No, I think we've just come to a census here that I think we want to have a work session with the other 2 entities and trying to figure out where we're at and prepare to do 2080. Thanks for your input, Andrew. So everyone's good with that, if it's on follow consensus, and we'll move forward. On June 17th, our board meeting is currently set for 9 o'clock in the morning. This boardroom will be busy on the 17th in the morning. It's tax sale day, I believe. And so we need to reschedule our 17th meeting. We need to move to a different date, or I believe tax sale usually is over with late morning or early afternoon. So we can move it to later in the afternoon on the 17th or the evening, or move to the 18th. At 9 o'clock, I do have a meeting at 9, on the 18th already set up.
I do too. 9 o'clock. Either does the 20th or the 19th. I would say do it later in the afternoon if that works. If you have some idea what time the tax sale will be over, or is it really hard to tell?
Done by noon.
Okay.
Yeah, we shoot, 3 o'clock or 5
3
o'clock?
o'clock.
3 o'clock?
We're still out here doing 4:35.
Yeah, that's safest, and it's in the record that we moved our meeting.
I move we move our June 17th meeting to 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
I second that.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, we'll make sure that people are supposed to come for reports and stuff are aware of that.
And the media.
All those in favor of 3 o'clock, June 17th meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Would anyone like to speak to the public? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Gentlemen, thank you everyone.